Hi, and welcome back to the Mob Mentality Show. I'm Chris Lucian, and my co-host is Austin Chadwick. And today we have Matt Phillip to talk to us about XP in the classroom. It's back to school, everybody. Psych safety, remote work, and if we have time, level collapse. But first, Matt, would you give us a little intro, and then we can jump into the topics?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be with you all. Yeah, I'm. If no one says anything beyond the show, I'm an agile coach, but I try to AKA myself as an organizational refactorer, which no one knows anything about, which is just fine for me. But basically, trying to help organizations succeed in the digital technology space, from teams to leaders, more so leaders these days, just because I think that's where we find a lot of leverage. But yeah, and then part time, my kind of hobby job or my sideline job is adjunct professor at the local university here in St. Louis. So anyway, I try to keep things interesting, but that's what I'm doing these days.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you can combine those passions and get the Agile XP world into the academic world. So how's that going, and what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a fun challenge just because I've never really worked in academia, and I know that's a
Mm.
whole area, and there's a lot of really smart people. So partly it's just that I have a massive imposter syndrome. It's like you got all these doctors and people who've got all these grants and publications, and it's just little old me trying to help people learn how to work as software development teams. But it's great. It's talking about XP and what should people be learning as they come out of school, and so for me, I'm always trying to learn myself, and I tell the students that I'm like, hey, I'm learning just like you all, and even this semester, I'm trying some new things with mastery-based learning, which is a different approach to teaching and learning. Many of us, I grew up in America. Many of us didn't really have that form of teaching pedagogy, so I'm trying new things all the time, trying new things to help people learn how to do things better. Some things work, sometimes they don't, but that's part of it. That's kind of that learning from failure. And so anyway, it's a lot of fun to learn alongside the students.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, it's something we've talked a lot about in the show, how basically in the industry, we just assume that students don't have any XP, TDD, or Agile knowledge, coming out of university. So it's always like, encouraging to hear when it's done. So applause for one, back to school and applause, yes. And then the other thing for me is, did you call yourself an Agile professor? Like, is that like your title, or is that just like,
No, well,
uh,
it's adjunct.
oh, adjunct? I thought you said
Yeah,
Agile professor, and I was
yeah,
like, whoa, they have that title.
that would
Okay,
be kind of cool.
adjunct
Well, I
professor.
guess depending on what your point of view is these days on Agile, but yeah, that would
Yeah.
be certainly a unique title. I think that would be.
Okay.
I don't know if more people would sign up for the class, or if people would kind of avoid that. Kind of,
Okay.
I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
want
yeah.
that. But maybe I'll try to work that in. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
If
Awesome.
if if organizational refactor doesn't catch on, I'll use that.
Cool, cool, cool. So, is teaching Agile or things like that in the classroom something you've done in the past? Is it something you're
Yeah.
planning to do in the future? Kind of what's the history for you there?
Yeah, I've taught. I mean, I think like you guys too. In various industry contexts. Helping people learn how to do things differently, better, try new things. XP, um, from a coaching standpoint, done trainings and help people learn in a classroom, on the job, kind of stuff. So helping people learn is not terribly new to me. It's just more just in the university context. So this is my second year doing it, and really I think my natural approach, working with teams and industry, it lends itself nicely to a classroom where there's more active learning happening. So there's a lot of hands-on stuff. There's a lot of coaching that actually happens in the classroom. I'm not standing up and lecturing a lot. It's really I'm trying to design a really immersive, engaging, almost like a war room or a Bayo room that you would find in a high-performing team space. I try to create that environment for the students so that they at least know what it feels like and looks like. And I think for me, especially coming, after COVID time, a lot of people, working remotely, and we can talk more about that later, but people working remotely have never really experienced what it is to work in that kind of like high energy, very dynamic, very positive, very that kind of hum of activity that you have in a co-located space where people are pairing, mobbing, ensembling, uh, you have information radiators around you, and so it's just really kind of like you're in the flow. I don't think a lot of people, I don't know what you have experienced, in the last 4 or 5 years, but I think a lot of people don't even have that mental model. What does it feel like to work in that kind of engaging workspace? And so I try to create that for the students as much as I can.
Nice, nice, nice. Right on. Yeah. How many classes have you done in this kind of war room, high energy style, high engagement
Yeah,
style?
well, we're getting there. It's not. It's like, but
Okay.
I think design. Especially even like a physical classroom. You have to kind of work within the constraints of, are the desks fixed in the kind of the traditional rows and the kind of lecture hall style, or do we have some
Yeah.
flexibility? So when I have a chance, I request a room where we can kind of move things around, have some pairing stations, have like a little team spaces, just to do different exercises together. But even just getting people moving around, trying some things. It's so always got these constraints. But this is my second year. I taught basically it's a master's level program in the computer science department where it's basically I've taught principles of software development, and then this is a software engineering class, which is meant to be like going a little deeper on some of these topics. What does it mean to have some competency with test-driven development? What does it mean to, be able to refactor the patterns? What does it mean to be able to facilitate and be, a tech leader of some kind? And what are those kind of generative behaviors we want to see? A lot of things a lot of times I stress with the students, especially in our era of AI and generative AI, is what kind of a developer, what kind of teammate do you want to be? I kind of make a distinction between a commodity developer and a craftsman. Like commodity developers, it's not very enjoyable work, but it's also you're the most likely to be uh, undone by generative AI, right? So I try to help people think, what at a meta level, kind of big picture, what are you doing here? What's not just we're not just plugging in code and crossing our fingers and hope things run, but like we're actually thinking about things a little more deeply, the why and how to lead a team and work effectively that way. So, even just that kind of mental model, what kind of a developer do you want to be in your career? Now, of course, people, you need to get a job at some point. You need to, get working. And so you don't always have a choice in the matter, but really just kind of having a self-conception that's maybe different from I just need a job or this is the thing that I can find something in. We want to go beyond that.
It's funny, in the like academia versus commercial world. I think one of the big things that I noticed is that in the academic space, students never have to get their project to run again in the future. And so it's like 6 months or a semester or a quarter, and they get a program running. And then like there's no experience of maintenance, right? And so, I often find that a lot of the lessons that we learn from, decoupling from UI frameworks or unit testing so that you can maintain later, it's often lost, and the value is lost on because I think there's this concept that students build up that their work is just going to disappear 6 months later. So I often find myself thinking about that. Um, so yeah, I don't know how you solve that because often students are motivated to get through something as quickly as possible with as little time spent on it as possible, so that they can go do other things. So yeah, it's an interesting problem.
Yeah, you're right. It's like what is our focus? Our short term versus long term or sustainable term. And that goes kind of back to some of the things you've been talking about in the show previously. It's like what are we optimizing for? What are our goals here? Is it like we
Yeah.
need to crank out something by a certain deadline? We don't really care about it beyond that. Yeah, a semester could be that type of thing. But one of the things I use to kind of reinforce that or to get closer to what you're getting at, Chris, is having them work with real customers. So,
Right.
and real is, can be a stretch because the last semester, the project was a website for my amateur soccer league that I play in on the weekends. And so, it's kind of an underground league. And but we didn't have a website, and so there's people local who were able to dedicate to come into class once a week and, hey, show us what you got. Here's some of the things we want to see. Maybe I didn't like how you did that thing, but actually knowing people are using the software has a tremendous reinforcing effect on people's motivation, but also that feedback loop to say, all right, I do need to maintain this in some way now, maybe not beyond the semester. But you at least get, when you're seeing a customer face to face and saying, how are you going to use this? Are you using this? It's a really effective experience for the students.
Nice, nice. I like that. That's a great way to kind of bring that into the classroom. And I guess I was curious on a couple other things how you brought it into the classroom. So for example, refactoring to patterns might be one interesting to hear how you do that, or teaching students facilitation. So if you got any thoughts on either of those, I'd be curious.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, and this is kind of my challenge this semester, moving to this mastery-based learning approach. So if you're not familiar, are you guys familiar with mastery-based learning or?
I am to a degree. I don't, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Yeah. Well, it's relatively new to me. I think, so I'm trying to understand, what does that look like here? It's not just about, having one chance to pass a quiz, a test, exam. Did you or did you not? Everybody's on the same schedule, but it really respects individual learner styles, individual learner pace. But moreover, it's really meant to help us understand, not have we just passed a quiz or ticked a box, but do we actually know a thing? Do we have some competency where we can feel confident that we know how to do something? Now, if you're figuring out an algorithm, or they're solving a problem, some of those things are easier to kind of assess, in a quiz, or you can even have it online or whatever. Some of the things, like, and this is, I'd like to know your all's thoughts. How do you know if someone knows how to do TDD? I know you talked about katas a couple of times ago. What are the ways to assess this? How do you give
Mhm.
yourself confidence? And this is one of the things I encourage the students about is, when you're finished with this course, you're going to have confidence that you know how to do a thing. When you
Mhm.
have an interview, when you're actually in the job, um, so that maybe you're not an expert, maybe you're not a master. You can't do that in a semester, but you at least have some competency. And so I've been using this framework. It's kind of an open framework. It's called the Skills Framework for the Information Age. Basically, I've used it in industry just to kind of give people, especially more tech organizations, software groups, understanding of how do we develop skills, and how do we evaluate ourselves. And so they have a nice system. They call it levels of responsibility. And so it goes from, I think, 1 to 7. First level is like, I can follow along. Like, you're coding. I'm watching you do, write a test. I see what you're doing. I don't know how to get started maybe, but I can see how you're done. I can follow you. Or a stand-up meeting for that matter, retrospective. Do I know how to behave in a retro? I can follow along. Yeah, great. Level 2 is assist. I can meaningfully help you do the thing. Right. So you pass the keyboard to me, or it's my, I can pass the test. I can actually be a meaningful pairing partner.
Nice.
And then level 3 is really that I can apply this. I can do it the way I interpret it. I can do it myself without you helping me. Maybe some input if I get stuck, but really that's the level I want to get the students to for most of these competencies. And so it's a lot of hands-on stuff. It's like we're gonna just be doing this in class. And again, one of the nice things about mastery-based learning is the unlimited number of tries. So yeah, it's not just one and done. You fail the quiz, or you aced it, whatever. But you try. It's just like anything we really learn. Riding a bike. Although one of the students yesterday, I said, okay, who when you first started learning to ride a bike, were able to do it the first try. And one guy actually raised his hand. I don't know if he's got superhuman balance or whatever, but maybe he just forgot that he fell a couple times. Anyway, but this is how we just naturally learn anyway. We try and we try again, and we learn. And so having them, and this goes to the kind of the psychological safety bit, is having them feel comfortable making mistakes in front of people, which is difficult. It's difficult depending, especially where you've come from, how you've been educated, where you come from in the world, depending on your cultural habits and more. So it can be difficult getting that safety. And so one of the things we did yesterday, we just did some juggling. I brought a bunch of hacky sack ball, juggling balls, and I said, right, we're just going to juggle. And most people don't know how, in a group of 20, don't know how to juggle necessarily. And so, everybody's just kind of, it's fun because we're all in the same boat. I don't know how to juggle, and I'm in there, throwing balls off the wall. Um, but just getting people comfortable with failing and learning from that and seeing your progress. I think that's the thing too.
Right.
Whether it's katas, you can oh right, I've seen this kata, I can kind of, patternize myself, but just building those micro level steps toward competency. So, and then practicing facilitating. I have, again, like the smallest step is basically I have students do a warm up for each class. So I demonstrated yesterday. We did this simple, like silly, like getting to know you bingo, right? You go around, you meet people. Do you have a dog? Uh, uh, but just doing a warm up is an easy way, or lower barrier way to start feeling like, oh, I'm in charge of creating a space for people to interact, to accomplish something. So each class session, I have a student, or they can do it in pairs, sign up to facilitate our warm up. It's 5-10 minutes, and then progressively move on to facilitating a team meeting retrospective. So anyway, so that's kind of how I handle it. Like I said, I'm still learning how to figure out, what are these micro steps? What are these objective points that I can say, right, I've gotten to this level. But I'm interested to see how you guys think about that, and how you assess, can someone do TDD? What is TDD? What is refactoring the patterns?
Yeah. In the past, we've talked about the 6-minute interview, and that, so interviewing for it, I think is can be a matter of simple TDD exercises, but yeah, and I think there's different levels of TDD, right? So I think from katas, when people are just introduced to the concept, um, if you completely exclude mocking in general, then I think TDD is fairly easy to explain to somebody. But I think, like I said in the past, when I'm explaining TDD to a student, they're like, why would you write all this extra code when you could just write the thing? And so I think I have more trouble explaining to people why they need to do TDD if they have no work experience. Like 1 year into the industry, and some of my favorite hires are just like a year where they spent time in a bad environment and then they come in, because like that's the best junior level person, because it's like, oh, by the way, everything about why it's why it can get bad, right?
Yeah.
And so, those are some of my favorite hires, but when it's like somebody for like fresh out of school, often it's, why would we spend all this time when we can just write it first, and so, I think almost, you know, maybe the education would be examples of things that are falling apart and fixing them without breaking them, and then with TDD and without. I would almost take that tact, because teaching somebody like, oh, you can square a number by running this piece of code, and then it shows up with a green checkbox or a red checkbox if it's red. Um, I think that's fairly straightforward, but I think like test triangulation or zombies, the 0, 1, many boundaries, etc. Um, those are deeper concepts where you can kind of start explaining why we would triangulate, why we would get code coverage, why would we branch. Sometimes I explain, like, as a rule of thumb, I don't like to use this often because I don't like drawing attention to cyclomatic complexity too often, but it's like you should probably have at least the number of tests as you do cyclomatic complexity, because that means that every branching code path will at least have one covering test, those sorts of things.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it generally falls short when people are in a rush to prove themselves, and I think that people are most often in that mode early career.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, that's like, what's the level of letting them kind of, you know, giving them enough rope to hang themselves with, and that
Yeah.
kind of works itself out in the project too. They know that we've got a weekly cadence. We've got a customer coming in, and they're just going to slam something in, and and then lo and behold, they're working to the last second, and they can't. The bill's broken. They can't get something actually on to
Right.
production, and it's like, right. So and you don't want to be like the guy who's like, I told you so, but
Yeah.
it's a good learning moment, right? And you say, this is why it might be helpful if we figure if we not wait until the last minute to actually integrate or see what happens when we try to actually go to production. So some of those things just kind of naturally exhibit themselves as we go. But
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Austin.
No, 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 it's great. And yeah, I guess to answer your original question is and then I have a follow-up question is what's often nice about kind of the war room environment or a mob or a pair, something like that, is you can kind of see the levels as they progress, right? Like, you said level one. Can someone even follow along with what, is being done in the mob, right? And so if they can't, then we can, slow down and address that, right? Can they be a decent partner to do part of it, or can they do it on their own? Can they navigate it? Can they teach someone else how to navigate it, right? Like, so you can kind of see the full progression. Are they now coaching others on how to do this, right? And so those are all like different depths of knowledge, I think. And I think one follow-up question I have for you, that's been a really difficult one, I think, in kind of the software world and also kind of the education world for myself and for my kids, is I love the mastery style learning. And it has a lot of synergy with other, educational things that I won't go soapbox on right now. But I feel like it kind of feels like it's fighting against the entire system that's set up, right? You're like completely swimming upstream, because I feel like mastery requires that you do a few things well, not 1,000 things barely, right? But I feel like most educational systems and even training systems in companies, the goal is to get you to level one on 50 things because that's what looks good on a brochure, right? And so it's really hard to get mastery if, hey, we spent 5 minutes learning TDD. Are you done yet? We got to move on and learn patterns. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
yeah, like, and it just seems like large classrooms and pacing just seems to destroy mastery. So I'm wondering how you handle that in your
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah, that's a great point, also. I mean, yeah, it's unlearning my own natural behaviors too, and like the way I've come up
Yeah.
through the system. And so, yeah, even just the question of needing to have midterm grades, So, I was redoing the whole, the rubric and the whole syllabus, and and there's important school dates. It's like, oh, you need to have midterm grades in, and of course the students want to have that too. They need, no one wants to be on academic probation and that kind of thing. But when you apply the lens of mastery based, like, so for an A, for our course, you need to get to the target level of responsibility for 11 out of the 12, at least 11 of the 12 skills. And one of the skills is they get to choose their own, by the way. So that's kind of, we'll see how that works out. And you get to set your own target responsibility level for that. So um, so the question is, halfway through the course in time, should you have mastered, 5 or 6 skills, or given that our learning is not linear, and given that you might be close to getting there on all of those, or even 5, but you're not there. I told the class last night, if I used mastery based learning for midterms, most of you would have a D at midterm, and you'd get in trouble, um, which is not. So I said, one of the nice things about mastery based learning is that you can never go back. Your grade never declines, right? Because once you attain a skill or attain
Yeah.
a competency, you've got it, right? I mean, you can degrade, of course, but in general, if you take a quiz and you get a 90, and then you can take another quiz and you get a 60, your grade's going to go down. But like, not so mastery. And so I tried to emphasize grade protection. The one exception is the midterm, because I'm like, I'll just prorate how you might be doing, and just so you can kind of have some grades. But yeah, it's a tricky thing, I'll be the first to acknowledge I don't know how to solve it yet. There's a lot of people who have been doing mastery based learning, so I'm hoping to reach out to some other professors and people who do this kind of stuff. But just to learn. But yeah, I mean, the key I think is really that objective measurement. How does a student, and it's only fair to the student, how do I know that I've achieved something? You know, what are those micro skills that comprise the competency that I can actually be saying, right, I've got this. Like, you know, in juggling, you know, can I toss two balls without dropping them? You know, can I do like
Mhm.
the cascade thing? You know, there's kind
Yeah.
of progressive things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is. Oh, go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
I was gonna say, the technical aspects, I think Austin, you were saying that, can you follow along? Can you write a unit test? Can you navigate a unit test? Someone else to do a unit test, and can you teach someone else to, or coach them in it? Another way to look at it would be different different formats of testing. So, um, you know, writing the initial unit test, writing a test with a mock, writing a London style test, writing a Detroit style test. What's the difference between them? Because like so I think conceptually, if somebody knows the difference between London style testing and Detroit style testing, um, then they understand mocking and they understand multi-tier architecture, right? And
Mhm.
so you could do a series of skills that builds gradually on top of each other. Um, you could even go into adding approval testing or other types of testing out there, mutation testing,
Mhm.
and full stack end-to-end testing. Although Austin would tell them to close their ears and shun the.
Yes. Yeah. Don't listen to evil Chris, everyone. Just kidding.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I could think of like a number of things, like, and also each of the zombies can be a mastery level as well. So 0, 1, many, boundaries,
Yeah.
interfaces, exceptions, special cases, and so you can certainly do a very technical looking incremental uh, curriculum that way.
Yeah. Well, okay, Chris. So you just no good deed goes unpunished. I'm going to be contacting you for
Yeah, absolutely.
all your wisdom here. And by the way, it's an open invitation. If you're ever in St. Louis, you can come do a guest lecture because
Awesome.
you've heard the expression "lazy developer is a good developer."
Yeah.
Lazy professor is a good.
Yeah.
I frequently have people who know a lot more than I do, which is not hard, come and do guest lecture just because people know stuff in specialties or have been doing this longer than I have, more deeply, and so anyway, exposing them to multiple voices, I think is a key thing too. But I am going
Awesome.
to follow up with you because this is really great stuff.
Good.
Cool.
Do it. Do it. Nice, nice. Well, I think it might be a good time to move on, but I think I'll have one more question just because I'm such an education nerd. I'm so sorry. I'm destroying the agenda, but um yeah, so one thing I've noticed, because you mentioned assessment, right? So for mastery to work well, you have to have really good assessment or measurement, right?
Mhm.
And it's something I've struggled with is that is very feasible in a small group, like let's say a mob of 3 or 4 people,
Yep. Yep.
to assess where they're at. You can see like, oh, they're clearly at level 1, they can follow along, but they can't navigate it, right? Or wow, they're navigating it strongly now. So yeah, they're there, right? Um, I've never been able to figure out a way to do it reliably in a large classroom. There are ways, but I've never, it's kind of like the Scrum certifications, right? You had a conference room with 100 people in it. They all heard a lecture and they all passed a quiz. You're all certified Scrum Masters now, kind of thing, where it's kind of like, how do you, when it's that many people, how do you trust the assessment? Like, like as me and Chris have seen before in the 6-minute interview style mob katas, someone could pass a Scantron on TDD, but
Yeah.
could not do it. Definitely could not do it, and so
Yeah.
um yeah, I wonder how you handle that difficult problem in your classrooms.
Yeah, I know it's a hairy question. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Okay. Yeah.
One of the things I tried to develop, and I'm going to be working in this semester too. Well, first I have a teaching assistant who's been in my
Mhm.
class before, so that's really helpful. And then bringing in some guest stars, from the local community who you can kind of help coach and kind of be in the small groups. Um, but one of the dynamics I'm hoping to get through is the students themselves being aware, oh, Austin's ready to do his thing. Like, hey, professor, watch Austin. He knows how to he can TDD now. And so And so getting them to kind of be aware of each other, I think might be helpful. That's one of my approaches here. And then they can kind of be building in that even awareness when they assess each other. Not that they're not going to be the final arbiter, of course, but them even just being able to acknowledge in their peers, oh right, I can see how he's moving forward. And of course, I emphasize pairing and ensemble is actually one of the skills that they're learning. So even just so I always like to, gaming behaviors are the behaviors we want. Like aligning those gaming behaviors with, oh yeah, if you game this, great. If you master all the skills, great. That's the whole idea here. If you want to pair with someone, go for it. That also maybe, I think one of the interesting things that kind of coming into this, academic environment for the first time last year really slapped me across the face is generative AI. It's like, right. How is this going to be? I actually inherited the class from a former coaching teammate of mine, and he's like, by the way, there's a lot of cheating that goes on, and I'm like, really? I guess naive, but again, that's because we've incentivized people to just learn enough to pass the tests, and so if you can slam in, whatever you need to or generate something from AI, it's fine. So this year, I think for the first time, the university said, right, everybody, all the professors need to have some kind of a statement on generative AI use. And so, all the whole spectrum, from absolutely prohibited entire, 100% to go for it. And so I'm defaulting to use it as a tool in general. If there's explicit uh, things that I want you to do not using AI, I will tell you. I will be explicit. Like one thing that we did in the last semester was a personal retrospective. As you're I didn't have a final exam. I just do a personal retrospective. You can do it however you want to. You can like pair up with people. You can have someone else facilitate. You can actually have a conversation with AI, right? But don't let AI give you, that's not going to be your thing. So anyway, some of the students, unfortunately, I'm like, I think you used it. Anyway, but so that's been a thing too, and so understanding how do you get people to focus on learning the thing, because
Right.
you just crank out, just copy paste whatever the engine gives you, and I'm like, do you even know what you put into the repo? Did you even like check this out? So hopefully that'll come out in the wash a bit too. But I don't know if you guys have ideas or
Oh
listeners,
yeah.
viewers.
I,
I'd love
I have plenty of ideas. Like one thing I would do in that environment is for your tests, you could actually give the students a API where they incrementally submit tests for an API, and you give them an object that passes those tests. But when they submit each test run, it has to go in the order of zombies one at a time. So if they use generative AI, it would write too many tests, right? So then they would fail just because too much was completed.
right.
And then I would also I would make the questions very verbose, and I would hide prompt injections into the prompt. So, kind of like halfway down the paragraph, I would say, and talk about a banana. And, like only if you're an LLM or something. And often you'll be able to root out that sort of behavior. And then finally, I would talk to the students about just the fact that ChatGPT and other large language models are the most average programmer in the world. So if you wanted me to think about you as the most average programmer in the world and your employers to think the same, then continue to use it. So, some combination of those things.
I love it. That's great. Yeah, it goes back to that kind of commodity developer, commodity
Right.
crap. Yeah, that's great. All right, well, Chris, you just got yourself a new best friend because I'm going to be tapping all this wisdom. That's great stuff. Yeah.
Nice, nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. What I was gonna say, Chris, before you got to your second point was like, oh, I have a different prompt to get past your level 1, but you're level
Yeah.
2 now. I'm like, okay, now my prompt has to say, and don't talk about bananas,
Yeah, I mean, it just means like they read the question and they removed it from the prompt, but a lot of the times it's unlikely. So there are a lot of ways that you can just inject,
Yeah.
especially if it's like a series of questions and they just paste all the questions in.
Yeah.
then one of the questions can catch you on those things. And so, that at least shows that they're proofreading.
Yeah.
Um, I had seen that there was an article of somebody that put it on their job posting. So they basically ignored all of the cover letters that referred to any bananas. And so, that's certainly a thing you can use in the academic world as well.
That's great.
But yeah, there are a lot of other things too. You can name the API in such a way that it would confuse the LLM. So, say build me a tic-tac-toe board, but name it after chess pieces, right? And so all of a sudden now, if they don't write the test themselves, then the LLM is interpreting the variable names of the chess pieces and trying to extrapolate what you would write. There's all kinds of stuff. So
You've clearly thought about this. This is really interesting. I would like to, understand. It's like, how far do I want to get into the game? I mean, it could be kind of entertaining. It could be, but like, I want to establish a level of trust, and this kind of goes back to that safety concept. Of like, just I want you all to be honest with me, and like, let me help you. Help me help you. Because if we're not gonna play this game, and I just. I want you to learn. I want you to be able to do this stuff for real.
Yeah, and I guess there is also the idea that like I write most of my code with LLMs assisting me now, but I find myself just relying on higher level concepts to guide the LLM. So I think if they are encouraged to use LLMs, then you want them to be implementing a factory pattern rather than constructing items, right? All of a sudden now, an LLM is always going to new up a variable, right? Because it's the most average programmer in the world. They're not using factories. So if you assign factories as part of the assignment and you say do tic-tac-toe, but use a factory to do all your object construction, now all of a sudden the student needs to at least know what they're prompting.
Yeah.
Right. And so I find that LLMs quickly, there's two things that happen. One is either people abandon the LLM because they think they can't do it. And I see that all the time now. And everybody, a lot of people are out on AI. And I'm like, and I think people should give it more of a chance, but people need to get better at prompting. I think people, the type of people that are willing to cheat on something using an LLM are the type that won't invest the effort into the correct prompt. And so often they'll sabotage themselves even in the prompting.
Yeah, that's well said. I think that's the key is like that higher level conceptualization of how am I trying to harness this tool to do my will, and do good things.
There's one more thought I have on that. And, there was an article I read recently, and I forget the article, but they were saying that slang terms are evolving faster than ever before, and part of it is influenced by the large language models. So the only way that you can deem writing as authentic now is if it's using new slang that has not been incorporated into the LLM yet. And so because we have thousands of years of history compressed not using these slang terms, an LLM is less likely to use modern slang, and so it's actually influencing slang to move forward. And so there's a level of authenticity there. And so the other thing is you can just say use Gen Z language to write all your variable names or something, right? So the bus and service bus or
yeah. No cap, Chris. No cap.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, I am wearing a cap. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to move on. I think the one thing I'll say, my answer to all of this, the short answer is basically mob, which breaks the educational system because that is just an insanely small ratio. But anyways,
nice. Thank you. You buried the lead on that one, man.
Yeah. But so yeah, I mean, I guess we're getting somewhat down to the wire. We have a little bit more time. Did you have any sound bites on psychological safety, remote work, or maybe even level claps? I don't know what you're most passionate on to
lightning round here. Yeah. Well, I think a lot of these things are related. I think we talk about learning, facilitating learning, creating spaces where people can learn from failure. I did some research in the spring, and a lot of people, maybe some people who are listening or watching, participated. It was basically some research on what is the relationship between where we work and our level of psychological safety. So, safety being, your experience to feel free to have voice, to talk about your own failures, mistakes, propose novel ideas, be critical of things without fear of reprisal or punishment, that sort of thing. So because my hypothesis was really that the farther we get from each other, and it wasn't meant to be an absolutist position. We need to be working together in person again. Although that's my personal preference, I do think that teams, and again, going back to those experiences, like how we those energizing work environments, we have to somehow recreate that in a virtual space or remote space. So it wasn't meant to be kind of like a proof text for my point of view about where we should work, but really, what are the factors that we should care about? Like, have you met, at least in person, someone on your team? Have you met your manager in person? What are the quality of your interactions? Is it always on text or messenger, Slack, whatever? Or are you actually talking to people? So anyway, had a lot of interesting insights from that, and part of it goes back to kind of like what you're talking about, Austin, about the nature of a mob, or the nature of a whole team. The old whole team approach concept. One of the things that was interesting to me was, in addition to, yes, you need to teams that are the people who had the highest levels of safety in this research. Yes, they had met with their teammates at some point in the last quarter, months. Whether it's just going out for lunch or getting together, for a quarterly gathering in the office, team building stuff. Maybe not every day, but it did matter how often you were actually in person with people, even if you were working remotely. But the other things that mattered almost as much were the context. And so I tried not to use language of team, because everybody works on a team. But the way I describe team, if you're on 5 teams, you're not on a team. So I use the term context to describe what kind of context are you working in. It might be a bounded team. It might be multiple teams, matrix environment. But the type of context, whether it was a team or not, and the size of the team mattered just almost as much as whether you're actually having some in-person interactions occasionally. And so I thought that was really interesting, because it goes to organizational design, team design, and really understanding what is that power of the team, whether you've ever had that experience in a war room kind of concept, or whether you feel that in your remote kind of get-togethers. But having that sort of those contours or those attributes were really important to people's safety. Those are the people in the survey who reported the highest level of safety. And I just used Amy Edmondson's 7, I think it's 7 drivers of safety, the different questions. And so it's far from scientific. I actually had a call with Dr. Edmondson and Mark Whartonson and another one of their colleagues, just to kind of say, hey, does this feel right to you? Am I on the right path? And they were very helpful and gracious with their feedback. But so I'd like to find out more about that. I'd like to kind of go deeper and explore people's stories. I think there's a lot of nuance in there, obviously. But I didn't add. It was a tension between having a survey that was short enough that people would actually fill it out, and then actually trying to get as much possible demographic information as I could. But anyway, so that was kind of the insights for me is yes, working or seeing each other and being together in person occasionally matters, but your context and the size of your group matters almost as much. So I don't know what your guys' experience is. Your mileage may vary, of course, but or your preferences or what you see.
Yeah. Well, we are closing, but I'll note while I'm closing here that that I've definitely seen in my limited experience, that kind of having that high energy, high positivity war room feeling, whether that's remotely or in person, and then the close interactions and real relationships, basically.
Yeah.
Definitely has a high correlation with psychological safety. And then the things that Chris kind of sets up, at least for our org right now, kind of the meta level system and context stuff has a big impact on that too. So yeah, I think I'm in line with that. But we are out of time. So is there anything you'd like to share or plug before we close, Matt?
No, thanks. Yeah, it's a pleasure chatting with you guys. Yeah, and I am going to follow up with you on Chris on some of your wisdom. Anyway, but thank you. It's an honor to be on your show. And yeah, if people want to participate in that, it's ongoing research, so I can share that link with you all. But anyway, just want to say thank you for the time today. It's great.
Yeah, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much, Matt, for being on the show. It's been a lot of good learning for me on education, whether that's in the classroom or at work, helping each other learn, because innovative cultures and companies need to be always learning, right? And so it's key in the classroom and out. And really appreciate your insights on psych safety. And yeah, to our audience, please like, subscribe, share. Please share this with others. We invite you to join in on this conversation with your thoughts on these topics. How are you going to get past Chris's prompts? We can maybe have an arms race going in the asynchronous chat here. But otherwise, we'd love to hear your thoughts, and mob on, everybody, and have a good one. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye, everyone.